Good morning, everyone. On behalf of everyone at the Crest Network, my name is Bill Giannone, and I welcome you to this morning's webinar. Um, I did something a little different and fun today. What I decided to do is use a little bit of Dick's coaching in the title to the webinar. Dick always coaches that when you're trying to get someone's attention, you want to kind of throw it out there and you put forth a very catchy headline that makes people think. So I put 4 fatal mistakes up there. Today's webinar is entitled 4 Fatal Mistakes That Even Successful Companies Make All the Time. Yes, we run restoration companies, but it really doesn't matter. Every single company, no matter how small or how large they are, make mistakes from time to time. And these mistakes are absolutely expected and normal in your course of business. The problem is some of them, if you don't know what you're looking for and know how to handle them, they can cripple you. That's a reality in our business life. Avoiding mistakes takes discipline. It takes skill and it takes hard work. You can't just set a course and not make adjustments for how the winds are blowing. You have to be able to have a plan. You have to be able to have the talent to follow that plan, and you have to have the stick-to-itiveness and the hard work to do it as well. But most of all, it does take knowledge. Knowing what the mistakes are and knowing how to avoid them will make all the difference. Now, I said avoid them. You notice I didn't use the word correct them. What we're going to talk about today are mistakes that you need to avoid. Those are the ones that can be fatal to you, because if you do make these mistakes, by the time you realize them, it could be too late and there might not be a chance for you to be able to correct them. So instead of talking about correcting mistakes, we're going to focus on 4 fatal mistakes that you need to avoid. Okay, here comes your knowledge. We'll be able to pop the knowledge right into your head, and hopefully in the next few minutes, you'll be able to pick up a couple of tidbits that are going to make it real easy for you to avoid these fatal mistakes. Fatal mistake number 1, everybody suffers through it. It's resting on your laurels. Years ago, you had a vision and a plan and you worked your butt off and you spent thousands of hours away from friends and family. It all worked. It was worth it. Your efforts paid off and you have a successful, profitable company. So you're looking at yourself and you're saying, now's the time for me to, take it easy. I've gotten where I need to be. I've gotten to the top of the mountaintop and I want to maybe take a month or 2 off, or maybe I want to scale back my responsibilities a little bit, just do something a little different because everything's good. I've got it all done. That is wrong. You need to avoid resting on your laurels. If anything, when you start feeling like you've made it, you've only just begun. It's more like this scenario. It's like pushing a rock uphill. Your effort has to remain steady. If you think you've gotten to the top, that's a false top. You're going to tumble back down really, really quickly. So always do your best to continue the hard work. There's something to be said about putting in the hard work and understanding the hard work. There's an old expression that it's easier to become a millionaire once you've been a millionaire. And the reason for that is because if you were originally a millionaire and lost it, you know what it took to get there. So it's not anything that's in front of you that you can't really see. I mean, this guy pushing the rock, how does he know he's gotten to the top? He does it because he can't see over the top of the rock. Well, the same thing happens with our business. We might think we've gotten where we want to be. And for some of us, that might be 10 jobs a month, 15 jobs a month. For some of us, it might be, I used to be on a truck and now I'm not on the truck anymore. We could set that goal for ourselves, and that doesn't mean we didn't attain that goal. What it does mean, though, is that we might not have maximized everything we can get out of our company. So until we do that, we have to be careful about taking it too easy and resting on our laurels too quickly. I'm really, really hesitant to tell somebody that they should go into maintenance mode. There are some catchphrases out there that if you're not growing, you're dying. And if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. Those all have a little kernel of truth in them. But the most important thing to remember is you can enjoy your success without stopping what you're doing. You can modify what you're doing. And we're going to talk about some of those traps later on in the webinar. You can modify what you're doing, but you really can't stop what you're doing. If you're intent on stopping what you're doing, then I think you're at the point where you probably should be selling your company. Because if you're at the point of burnout, or if you're at the point of exhaustion, or if you're at the point where you just say, that's it, I've gotten everything I can out of my company, then I don't think you can be the best owner or leader within your company. I think then you'll be working against your own interest or against the company's interests. Okay, think about it, The Rock, think about a car also. If you're driving a car uphill and you take your foot off the gas, yes, it'll still keep going for a little while because of momentum. And even though you take your foot off the gas, there's still a little bit of gasoline that gets fed into that engine. But the bottom line is you're never going to get to the top of that hill or that mountain going uphill unless you keep your foot on the gas. You're just not going to. So you have to focus on keeping things going. Don't keep yourself from congratulating yourself. Don't cheat yourself out of small victories, but also don't treat them like the game is over. If you think about it like baseball, and in a previous webinar, I did a whole analogy between owning a business and the game of baseball. If you think about it like baseball, and we said to go out and just do your best for an inning, that would be where you're at right now. If you feel like you're resting on your laurels, you've only completed one inning and there's plenty more to go. So just do your best to not rest on your laurels. Pat yourself on the back, but keep things going. Next mistake that a lot of companies make, even when they're successful, is they hire based on need. Now, when you're small, that's an absolute necessity. We hire based on need. When we're small, we look at things and we say, well, I'll do the work until I can afford to hire a technician. And then once we get a technician, once we're doing enough work, then maybe we can hire a second technician. I get off the truck and then I start doing the marketing and we do well enough. And then the company grows to the point where I can hire a marketer. We're not telling you to go out and spend a ton of money on personnel when you're a startup or when you're a small company. We never do that. As a company grows, the biggest expense in any company, no matter how big your company is or no matter what your company looks like, the biggest expense is always your payroll, whether it's hourly employees or office staff. But what we tend to do is we tend to keep growing and we tend to keep hiring people based on our needs. We wait until we absolutely need somebody and then we run out and get them. Again, this is a wrong way to approach hiring. As we grow our company, it's really important that we have a strategic plan. I've talked many, many times about a 1-3-5. And a 1-3-5 is we need to have 3 different business plans laid out on paper. We need to have a 1-year plan with absolute handwritten goals. We need to have a 3-year plan and we need to have a 5-year plan. And within those plans, we need to have processes and strategies in place for how we're going to achieve those goals. So if you're a company that's doing 20 jobs a month and you say, my 1-year plan is I want to get to 25 jobs a month, which is 25% growth. That's great. My 3-year plan is to get to 50 jobs and my 5-year plan is to get to 100 jobs a month. Those are very lofty goals. You'd be really, really behind the 8 ball if you waited until you were at that 50th job before you started hiring people. Your growth model needs to include your timelines for hiring. And I'm here to tell you that really, really, really successful companies still make the mistake of waiting too long to hire because they're trying to justify their expenses at every juncture. Believe it or not, guys, there's certain thresholds in our industry and in our business that I've discovered through the years that if you get to a certain threshold of revenue, you need to change what you're doing slightly. We're going to talk about this in our very, very next fatal mistake. But when you make those changes, part of those changes is you might actually have to start not making as much money because you might need to invest back into your company. Labor and personnel is one of those areas that I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes. But you need to understand it's very important. Picture your own company right now. How many of you are operating with a full crew? Now think about how many of you are operating with a skeleton crew. I'm sure very, very reasonable for me to say some of you guys are probably operating with too few personnel. I don't think that that's anything out of control. I think that's absolutely something that you guys are doing. I don't blame you for doing it. For every person that's sitting around doing nothing, you're spending upwards of $1,000 to $2,000 a week. That's money that could be going into the business or into your pockets. So I don't blame you. It's just the reality that if you're a successful company and you're still operating with the mindset of keeping a very, very small skeleton staff, you're saving dimes and losing dollars. Understand that. If you want to have consistent growth in your business, it's more important to bring people on just before they're needed, have them trained, and have them ready to handle that new increase in business. That's a true model of success. So we said we were teasing the growth model before. Your next fatal mistake, number 3, which to me, I think absolutely is the one in our industry which is violated the most. Thinking your business is scalable. Your business is doing great. Everyone is doing their job and the clients are happy. You have a dream scenario, and that's where you are today. So why, when you're sitting down and you're trying to think about what the future looks like, why wouldn't it make sense for you to just say, exactly what I'm doing now, I'm just going to do, I'm going to bring in more people and I'm going to double my business. I'm going to bring in more marketers. I'm going to triple my business. That makes absolute sense, right? Wrong. It absolutely does not make sense. I've touched upon it before, but when you're doing this, you can't think the things you're doing as a $1 million company are going to translate to a $2 million or a $5 million company. In our industry, guys, there's a threshold, and the threshold is $1 million. You can basically be, and this is not a pejorative term, but you could basically be a chuck in a truck and an owner operator doing a lot of the work yourself. And you could operate successfully and work your butt off and be $1 million company. Again, if your average invoice is $6,000, you only need to do about 14 jobs a month or 3 a week in order to be $1 million company. I know lots of guys out there, and we actually have some Crust members out there who are at that volume level, and they're very successful. But they can't obviously take that and double it to 2 million. You're not going to be able to do 25 to 30 jobs a month by being that same guy running out and doing all the jobs and doing all the marketing yourself. So you have to scale your company. $1 million is a scale number in our industry. Over $1 million, you need to change your business model. The next threshold is 2 million. You can get to 2 million by making some small tweaks to the $1 million model. Once you get to 2 million and more, you need to make some major tweaks to get to the next threshold level, which is 5 million. So if you make those tweaks when you're at 2 million, your next threshold where you could operate as an entity is 5 million. And then at 5 million and above, you need to have yet another structure to your company. What do I mean about the structure? Well, let's take a look at what this is. This is a job pyramid. If you are a $1 million company, you really only need two layers. You really only need the bottom layer and the top layer. So you need the owner, CEO slash, and you need the hardworking employees, and you could do all that work. But as your company grows, these are all the different levels that have to be added into your corporate structure in order to make your company scalable. Okay. We work with a company here in Atlanta, and they've had some really, really good growth over the last 4 years or so. And 4 years ago, there were 3 levels in the company. Right now, there are 5 levels in the company. Every field job has hardworking employees. Every field job has team leaders and supervisors. Every field job also has middle management, who I would consider the VPs. And then there is a layer just below the owners who does the general management. So let's just call it president and vice president level, or kind of combined. But there are 5 levels in this company, but the company has had incredible growth, and we needed to have that installation of all these additional people in order to manage the growth. We're not doing 15 jobs anymore. We're doing 60, 70 jobs. We're doing full service aspects. So we're doing different parts of that job, like contents and environmental cleanup. And we're doing repairs in-house. So there are a lot of different things going on. So you need a lot of eyes, and you need a lot of management, a lot of oversight. Well, in order to do that, the owners had to commit to personnel. We talked about personnel in our last fatal mistake. And the owners, when we went from 2 to 5, the owners weren't willing to make that commitment of personnel right off the bat. And yes, that struggle from 2 to 5 was much deeper because we didn't have the right amount or the right quality of personnel in place prior to making the growth. So now, when we made the move from 5 million and above and added these additional layers, the owners did make a commitment to make that personnel commitment and bring on the management teams much quicker than they were needed. So it actually was costing them money at the start. But you know how important it is, guys, when you're bringing somebody on? Think about trying to coach a little league team, and the very first time you meet all of your kids is on the first game. That would be really difficult to know what to do with the kids and how to teach them certain things that you want them to do. Well, the same applies to running your business. Once you get to the $5 million and above level, you have very certain processes. And again, I've talked about this in previous webinars. You want your processes to control the day. You don't want your personnel. So your processes are going to be in place by the time you get to that $5 million level. What won't be in place will be the people who are tasked with making sure your processes are being used to the best of the company's abilities. If that's the case, we've got 2 problems. We've got a people problem, and we've got a process problem. Because without people knowing what the process is, the process will never get followed properly. And without people in place before the growth occurs, the growth is going to be very haphazard. And I've said this before, and it is really true. We always need to keep in mind that growing too fast or growing uncontrolled is the single greatest thing that ruins companies. It's not failing to grow. You could be a $5 million company that does $5 million year after year after year, and you could be okay if you're happy with that. There's nothing wrong with stable companies, especially what I'll call owner-managed companies. They're not stock companies. They're not Fortune 500 companies that you'd see on Wall Street. They're mom and pop companies. You could be a mom and pop $5 million or a $2 million or $1 million company and do that every year and be perfectly okay. You're not going to be at risk of going out of business. But if you make that growth decision to go from 2 million to 5 million, and you don't have the right people in place to manage that for you, and if you don't have the right processes in place, if those things don't exist, you literally could grow yourself into extinction. So be really careful about that. Understand what I'm doing today in my business. It can't look the same going forward. Scalability depends on a lot of things. And the most important thing it depends on is understanding that what we're doing today is not what we're going to have to be doing tomorrow. That takes us to our final and most fatal of the 4 fatal mistakes, is avoiding change. It's been a long road, but you've got it all figured out right now and you're successful. So you want to freeze this moment in time. You'd love for it to just stay exactly the way it is and stay away from change. Guys, I don't have to be the one to tell you, but we all know that that's impossible. There is no way to avoid change. Every single day, things happen. For those of you who've been in this industry for 10 years or more, I think to a person, you would have to be honest with me and you'd have to tell me exactly how much has changed in your business over the years. I would venture to say that just about everything in your business looks and feels different than it did 10 years ago. Many of you have probably even changed your logo or changed your website. But if not, you've definitely changed a lot of your personnel. You've changed the processes by which you do your business. You've changed the way you get your business. You've changed the way you bill for your business. All of those things have changed. You know, Dick and I talk about it all the time from an industry standpoint. I've only been in this industry 13 years. Dick's been in a lot longer than I have, but we tell everybody the changes that have occurred are so drastic in our industry. And the problem is that many, many times the owners in our industry are so intent and hardworking that, for lack of a better term, they've got their heads down and they don't see that change. Well, if they don't see the change, they are avoiding it. You have to be looking out for change. You not only have to be looking for it, you need to be embracing it. Companies that do the best out there are companies that are constantly evolving. They're constantly forward looking. If we're making 1, 3, and 5-year plans, don't you think it makes sense to try to figure out what the industry is going to look like in 5 years? There's guys out here in our space that Dick and I have worked with in the past. They're no longer in business. The industry passed them by. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. The industry passes people by. It's not a fun thing for us to be the ones to tell them that they're on a sinking ship, but every once in a while we have to let them know that things are not the same. You know, we have adapted our coaching techniques over the last 15 years because the industry has changed so much. Dick is clearly not coaching and teaching the same things he did 15 years ago to marketers, because marketing itself has evolved and changed. 15 years ago, we were just on the cusp of social media networks. And now it's you can't be without your phone for 5 minutes. That was not the case when Dick was starting to coach marketers in our industry. It was a lot more of the old face-to-face rules, but now things have totally changed. It's much more about relationships than it ever used to be. The demands are different. Just think about the last 3 years, guys. If I was giving this talk to you in 2019, there's no way in hell I could have anticipated that our industry was going to have to suffer through a year and a half of COVID. And if you weren't willing to make changes to how you were going to do your business during COVID, you're not around anymore. But who could have had a 1, 3, or 5-year plan that included a global pandemic? Nobody could have. So for the companies that I have been working with through that time, one of the things we had to do is we had to instantly adapt our plans. And we had to come up with realities. Dick and I both hate the expression new normal, but we literally had to create new normals for how we were going to do business. We know a lot of that involved PPE protocols, protections, For Dick's purposes and coaching marketers, it was an entirely new way of staying face to face with your lead sources. For those who embraced those changes, they not only came out of COVID okay, they actually grew. Our company in Atlanta had its best year ever in 2020, only followed up by its best year ever in 2021, in spite of all of the difficulties in dealing with COVID. But the great thing is that I could say about the company in Atlanta is that we were ready and open for change. We were willing to do whatever it took to make the client still be number one. And if that client said, I can't have you till Thursday, we were going to show up on Thursday. We were going to make it work. We totally changed how we communicated with our lead sources to make sure they understood that what we were doing was in their best interest and their client's best interest. But we did spend a lot more time talking to them about the production side of our business so that they would be educated. That's not something we normally would care about. If it's a plumber giving us leads, we're going to hope that he trusts that we're doing the right thing. We don't get into the minutia of how we're going to actually do the work. But during COVID, we did so that we could help set expectations for them as well as their homeowner. Now we've got an advocate when the homeowner is questioning why we're wearing spacesuits in the house. We didn't want to put anybody in fear, but we also wanted to make sure everybody understood that we were looking out for everybody's interest. That's just a very small example. I'm sure you guys can think of examples every day in your own businesses where little tiny things come up and you have to say to yourself, should I go in that direction or not? Change is very scary. I'm the first one to admit that. I'm a little on the OCD side. I don't embrace change very quickly. I like what I like. I like a certain pair of sneakers, and I probably bought the same pair for the last 15 years. It's just not something that I enjoy or embrace. But I do know how necessary it is for businesses and for the individuals within those businesses to not only accept change, but to look out for it and to embrace it. We have to be willing to tweak our plans. And I'm a guy who's a spreadsheet guy. I don't like changing things, but we have to be willing to not only accept them, but to embrace them if we're going to be successful. Avoiding change is a death sentence. I'm old enough to remember when some incredible technologies came around back in the late 70s, early 80s. And those technologies allowed us for the very first time to record television shows. Yeah, I'm talking about VCRs. And VCRs were these incredible machines that allowed us to record shows. Well, on top of it, other industries bloom. Instead of just recording shows, now we could actually watch movies on demand, which was incredible to think of at the time, because we could go to a local Blockbuster store and we could rent a movie. Well, Blockbusters did great, and the companies that made these VHS or Betamax, which was Sony, they did great for a while. But the one thing that they failed to comprehend was that ultimately things were going to change. And if I said to somebody who's a 12-year-old right now that we used to have to go to the store, and we used to have to stand in line to wait for a movie to come out and then rent that movie and bring it home and watch it and then return it, your 12-year-old would laugh at us. And you know that's true. Because now we've got digital on demand everything. So if you own a VHS player in your house, you're probably older than I am. I'm not saying something. Yes, Blockbuster does not exist anymore. It was a $1 billion company and they are no longer in business. They were not able to adapt and change. Similar things are happening to other companies who are not willing to look at things from a different prism and make that change. So we have to always be willing. I'm not saying restoration is not going to be around for a long time. I'm just saying how we do things, how we go about getting our business, how we go about billing for our business, all of those things have changed drastically. Dick will tell you stories from when he first got in the industry that when the adjuster would show up on a job site, he would literally just ask the restorer, what do they think that this is going to come to? And the restorer would look around and say, oh, there's probably going to be like 25 grand. And they would sit there and write out a check for almost the entire amount right on the spot. The control 20 years ago was in the hands of the restorers. By the time I got in the business, the adjusters had kind of figured out the game and knew that they should get some professionals on their side to do their own figuring out of what the bill should be. And they started to control the checkbook a little more. Obviously, they're the ones with the money, so they started to become more and more difficult to deal with and less amenable to just writing checks out. I don't think any of us shows up at a job today and gets a check written out for 80 to 90% of the loss when the adjuster shows up on site. We have to prove a lot of things to them. That's just an evolution. If you were a company that relied on getting all the money up front and being able to dictate to the adjusters the terms of that payment, guess what? You're out of business right now. Dick and I know those guys as well. You need to embrace change. The last thing I'm going to say about change, it doesn't just apply to how you do your business. It applies to the people that you're doing your business for and with. Your clients have changed in the last 20 to 30 years. As your clientele gets younger, their wants, needs, and demands are different. You have to be able to adapt your response to their needs. Again, 30-somethings who own a home have different needs and wants than 60-somethings who own a home. Their availability is different. What they expect of you is a lot different. You know, if you're showing up and you're making them sign pieces of paper, they might be look at you with some crazy confused look, because when's the last time a 30-year-old signed a piece of paper? Just about everything they're doing is digital. They might actually look at you as a backwards company if you're not 100% digital, if you're not technologically up to date. Those are just some small minor things. Now let's think about our workers as well. We've talked about this a lot. In the last few years, especially since COVID happened, it's becoming increasingly difficult to hire personnel, especially for our entry-level positions. The wants and needs of today's youth, and I'm not going to categorize them by any kind of gen category, but today's youth have very different demands from their work life and their work career than we did. And I'm 60 years old, so I'm putting myself in a different bracket than today's youth. We thought of our jobs as something different than today's youth do. That's a reality. We could sit there and we can stomp our feet and we could say, I'm only going to hire people who think like me. And we'll be very unsuccessful in hiring. Or we can figure out a way that we can change our business model to adapt to those workers. After all, at the end of the day, we can't grow our business. We can't go from 2 trucks to 4 trucks to 8 trucks unless we can staff those trucks with capable personnel. Does that mean that today we can hire $13 an hour guys and expect them to get up at 2 a.m. to crawl through somebody else's sewage? Probably not. We probably have to think about that role in an entirely different way. So we might have to think about compensation totally upside down from what we think works for us. And we have to now start thinking about what works for them. Okay. Just some clear things that I know everybody's dealing with today, but I just want to make sure I point it out as a way that we need to say change is good, and I will do anything in my power to embrace it. So we're going to list these one more time. We're going to talk about how to avoid them. We talked about the 4 different things. The first thing is resting on your laurels. How do we avoid resting on our laurels? Keep working hard every day. There's an old phrase, and it's kind of like a saying, all I need to do is work 1% harder than yesterday. Do you know if you work just 1% harder than yesterday, which doesn't sound like a lot. We all know we could have done something 5 minutes more yesterday. Well, if we work 1% harder than just yesterday, at the end of the year, our company will have 37% more effort from us. That's the way the math works out. That's an incredible scale. They talk about it in finance as compound interest. I don't know if any of you have ever heard about that. Compound interest is when you put $100 in the bank and you get interest on a daily basis. By the end of the year, you're not only getting interest on that $100, but you're getting interest on the interest from day 1, 2, and 3 of that year. So compound interest is a great thing. Warren Buffett actually said it's the greatest invention since the wheel is compound interest, because you're making money on somebody else's money. Well, the same applies to working hard. If you can work just a little bit harder than yesterday, by the end of the year, you're working 1% harder than all those other 1% as well. And it's incredibly impressive for growth. So you could just work 1%. Doesn't mean you're taking your foot off the gas. You're still working, but you're also enjoying yourself and you're recognizing things. So just keep that in mind. We always want to avoid waiting till the last second to hire people. Hire new talent before you need them. This is really difficult. And again, I'm a consultant. I'm a coach. I'm not writing out the checks to your workers. So I'm certainly sensitive to the fact that you're writing those checks out. And you need to be the one to make sure that every penny you're spending is judicious. For those of you who have worked with me in the past, you know that I'll sit down and I'll study things like your purchasing habits to try to get you to save 3 or 5% on garbage bags, which might not be a lot of money. So I'm very sensitive to hiring talent before it's absolutely needed. But I think if you're practicing good strategic growth and you're on that cusp, I think you bring them in a week too early rather than a week too late. Because once the growth starts, everything in your power and your company's power should be focused on that growth, not on, oh shit, I have to go find a way to correct the problems associated with my growth. Being ready to remodel your business for growth. Remember, is your business scalable? No. It's scalable within those windows I talked about. From 0 to 1 million, it's scalable. From 1 million to 2 million, once you've changed the model and you're off the truck, you can be a $2 million company with the same model as a $1 million company. But once you exceed 2, you need to now change that scalability to a different model. So you have to be ready to remodel your business. If you think you're on that edge, you need to talk with me or talk with a professional about structuring your business for the next wave. That's part of that 1, 3, and 5-year plan. You can probably get through year 1 with your current model. But if you're bumping up against that $2 million number and you think your 3-year plan has you getting to 5 million, you absolutely should be giving me a call so that we can look at what your model looks like today and what that new model is going to look like that's going to get you over 2 up to 5. Doesn't mean we have to make a total change of everything. It just means that there's going to be some tweaks. It's going to depend a lot on your personnel and your processes that are currently in place, but it's something that you really need to make sure you're looking at. Finally, you need to embrace change. You can't be afraid of change. You can't avoid it. Sticking your head in the sand does not make it go away. Saying I'm an old school restorer doesn't make it go away. If you're an old school restorer, it's going to be obvious to everyone out there. And as a restorer, we've got a lot of people that we need to be proving ourselves to every day. We've got clients, we've got adjusters, we've got marketing lead sources. We need to prove ourselves every day. They want different things from us than they did 10 years ago. We've discussed this. You need to make sure you're capable of giving it to them. You can't stick your head in the sand and say, I am who I am. That just doesn't fly. That's not a successful business. That's not a growing business. That's not even a stable business. That's a business that's doomed for disaster. We just want to make sure that you have all the tools you need. I want to make sure that as an owner of your business, you avoid those 4 fatal mistakes. On behalf of Dick Wagner, I really want to thank you so much for joining us today. I didn't want to take up a full hour today. I know that with the summer on its way here, we've got a lot of things happening. I just wanted to make sure that we're all in growth mode. There's one way to avoid these fatal mistakes, and it's to be aware of them and stay really in tune with everything that's happening. So on behalf of Dick Wagner, everybody else here at the Crest Network, again, my name is Bill Giannone. Thank you so much for your time today. And we look forward to seeing you on our next Crest webinar. Have a great day. Bye-bye.